Hello and welcome to the first Chronowalkers tournament report. The indomitable EricL took our Worm Strike deck to the CompetEsport Circuit this past weekend. We'll throw up a link to the full deck list and a discussion that we did previously if you want to go really in depth. But for today, we want to talk about the tournament, how things went. So I guess to start us off, Eric, what are you thinking before the tournament? Like this is the deck. It feels interactive. What are the matchups that you feel you're good against? What are the matchups that you're worried about? What's that space like?
Yeah, so I mean, this deck was made kind of because I wanted to play Bazin and Emergent Worm and Epiphany, but also I think I was expecting a lot of con. I was expecting basically a lot of like in your face people fighting and trying to hit you and stuff like that, right? The general idea was to play your Epiphanies, play dedicated studies, get a lot of good cards, and then have like your Warp Strikes and Chronowalkers to avoid a lot of damage, and then emergent worms kind of burn your opponent out, and just kind of play this semi-aggressive, semi-defensive game plan.
Right, and we've got the two mind readings main deck to kind of follow that idea as well. Like if people are in your face, then you can have mind reading main deck because they're always going to be next to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are you worried about? Like, are there particular matchups that you feel might be more tricky?
Yeah, I mean, my main concern was Tashir, especially after Tashir won the Germany circuit, because she's trying to get that spacing, and we're trying to be close to their opponent because our emergent worms and warp strikes can really cover a lot of space, kind of close to us in rows, but Tashir kind of fights in columns, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no,
So
that's a great
if she's
dialogue.
attacking us, we can't actually hit her without using a bunch of our cards, which we can, and it's not a big deal. So we did test against that Tashir deck, that not the exact one that I had built just to try it out. We will be posting that gameplay video at some point, so I won't spoil it. But so all my mind was Tashir. Well, basically that kind of sums up like any champion that wants to kind of stay away and kind of hit me from range was my biggest worry, and that ended up being my downfall. So it does
Oh,
make sense.
okay. All right. So yeah, let's go straight into round one. So who were you playing against, and what did they bring to the fight?
So I don't want to mention any names, but if you want to give me a comment, say we had a great game, let us know. All of them were great. I'm very happy to have played everyone and talked to them there.
Yeah, just for privacy reasons, we don't
Yeah,
want to mention names. But yeah, round one.
except for one of
What do we
them
got?
because he's already wants to break the privacy.
All right.
Anyway, sorry. So round one, I played against Kasha. He was a new player. He had just learned them the day before, and playing with a deck that the second place winner had actually built. In fact, the second place winner had built like half the decks at this tournament. Um,
Nice.
so this was kind of, I would say, probably like a budgetish Kasha deck, which is fair. It's kind of built with cards that they have, and probably at the last minute with so that's fine. And yeah, I both games I had double Epiphany and dedicated studies turn one, and I basically just trapped them against a wall, which is a common tactic. So that's something you can always think about. You basically push them against the wall, or run at them and have them run away. You double emergent worm on either side, or quadruple, or whatever how many you have on either side. They can't get away, and they're just kind of stuck there while they're getting hit. So that was a common tactic, and I basically just overwhelmed him with like massive like card draw quantity and quality, and it wasn't even close. It did feel a little bad, but that's it is what it is.
Right.
So
Okay.
I won both games in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So round two. What are you up against?
Round two, I was against an Alta. So the first game against this Alta player, no epiphanies, so keep that in mind. Very close game, which tracks, and we'll see as we go forward. But eventually dodged in electro pheromones with a warp strike, and kind of took the game going from there. And then the
Okay.
second game, two epiphanies turned one, ended up using a Chronowalker to diagonally dodge an electropheromones and shut it down. And that was not close at all. Epiphanies are good. You draw them, you bullet your opponents. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, like, shutting down an electropheromone. So that's a HG31 aura play that you managed to shut down. Like, that's going to be at least a quarter of any champion's aura pool, if not
Mm-hmm.
more. So that's, yeah, a pretty big play to be able to shut down.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's we're going into round 3 then of the
Yeah.
2-0 record. Who are we playing against now?
So I am playing against Nubia Angels. This person made top 8, and they were previously, top 8 in another tournament. So they are a decent player. They know what they're doing, and they did well in this tournament. I went
Okay.
2-0. I went game 1. I played 2 Epiphanies and a dedicated studies on turn 1, and basically just from there just kind of pushed them into the edge and trapped them against the wall, and just had my, emergent worms beating him down, and it was, not really that close.
So the concept there is, yeah, while Nubia will outdraw you, because you had those early epiphanies and studies, you went for a fast game. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you forced them to try and like have to deal with you right then and there, because you had the card advantage right at
Yep,
the start.
exactly. And especially against Nubia, as we'll see later, you need to pressure her before her card advantage is too much of an advantage. And so you need to
Right.
try to get that card advantage as fast as possible, and then just press it really hard, or else you will eventually just get outcarded. So that's something to
Right. So
think
it
about.
is, well, yeah, almost the opposite of Adaris's, like, I can do 2 damage to you for 5 aura every turn, no matter where
Mm-hmm.
you are. Kind of like the exact opposite thing. Yeah. So game 2, I guess. Yeah. Forethoughting. What were you bringing in for
Well,
protected
I
combo?
basically brought in Aura Purge because they had dedicated studies,
Right.
and then turn 1 he dedicated studies, and I Aura Purged him, and he conceded.
Oh, he didn't have the Chronowalker backup to kind
No,
of deal with it.
nope.
Right. Uh,
So that was game 2. That was round 3. So 2-0.
all right, cool. So that's round 3.
Mm-hmm.
So what's round 4?
Round 4, another Nubia. This was on stream. In fact, if you want to check it out, there'll be a link in the description. Scheming Skeleton streamed it. It's the timestamp is at like 3 hours, 57 minutes, and 12 seconds. So you can check that out. We'll post the link. So this was a Nubia Bolt Shot. So unlike the previous deck, which was Nubia Angels, this one had 10 Chronowalkers and 12 Bolt Shots. And also, I won this 2-0. However, this person won the tournament. Congrats to Palmer. He won the tournament, and we'll get into a lot of the reasons why. But in this game, as you'll see, I had Epiphany on turn 1, game 1, and then game 2 I had double Epiphany into dedicated studies. And so I basically just kind of pressed my card advantage really hard and ended up winning. And also on rewatching the stream, I realized that at the end of the game I was at 9 and he had double bolt shot in hand, and I had no way to dodge it. So that was actually a very close game in game 1, a lot closer than I had originally thought.
Had you identified from like the closest the game, like, I know the deck was so warped towards Bolt Shot and Chronowalker?
Yeah. We were talking about it, and I was definitely very worried about that deck after I played it, because, as I mentioned in the beginning, this deck kind of struggles against those decks that are very heavily ranged, especially when they have the mobility I can't stop, right? So it's a combination of, I couldn't stop the Chronowalkers from moving unless I like try to kill them with a double emergent worm or something like that, and I
Right.
also couldn't necessarily dodge away from a bolt shot unless I could warp strike away, which you can't always do, and it's a little awkward to try to warp strike, especially when the thing you're warp striking off of is in bolt shot range, because then if they bolt shot again, kill the thing you're trying to warp strike off of, then you don't warp strike and you lose your card and get hit for a billion damage. So yeah, it was a little awkward. So I think in this first matchup, because I had those epiphanies, I was able to kind of pressure him fast and kind of kill him before he could try to get a lot of those ball shots out. But we'll get to the next game that we play
Okay.
later
Were
on.
you were you on the play or the draw for game
I
1? Do you
was
remember?
on the draw for both games.
Okay. Okay, and did that factor in at all to like any of the play patterns? Do
Probably
you think?
this deck is way stronger going first, because with the emergent worm you play it at the end of the round, hit them for 3, and then you immediately unexert and can hit them for 3 again. So if you have a bunch of emergent worms out, they're kind of trapped for like all of the first round of damage and then the second round of damage, and they can't really do anything about it, because if they try to like move in response, you just hit them again, so they can only really dodge one of those emergent worms on the unexert phase.
It also gives you that play pattern you were talking about earlier, where you box them in and this kind of just unload because you get to activate first.
Exactly.
So,
But then going second, if you play an emergent worm at the end of the round, they take damage, take one step back, and then they can tsunami and kill your things, and then you just played some burn spells instead of summons.
Right.
And so it like halves their efficiency, right? If when you're going second. So that's a huge deal. So that's another thing, is that all 3 games I eventually lost. Spoilers, I went second.
So yeah, you mentioned that another problem with this the deck that you're facing is all the bow shot means they can be at range. So like, did you find them like stopping one space away from you and doing the like hitting you with the furthest hit of the bolt shot like kind of consistently?
I knew he had a lot of bolt shots and he had a lot of Chronowalkers, but because I had those really strong starts, I didn't get a full sense of exactly what his deck was. And so, and I was, because I had a strong hand, I could play super aggressively, so I was constantly in his face. So like when he hit me with bolt shots, I was like basically right next to him. It wasn't until our second match that my lack of epiphanies allowed him to play a little bit more more of a range damage.
Okay, well, we won't go too far into spoilers, I guess. But how did you forethought against the bolt shot Chronowalker newbie deck?
So I didn't see any dedicated studies, so I didn't bring in Aura Purge. So I brought in a Tsunami and 4 Deceits, I believe. Is that what I did? Or did I take out Tsunamis? Alright, I don't remember. Because one of the issues is that because he has the mobility of the Chronowalker, and he wants to kind of stay at range, I don't really have a lot of ways to shut down or pressure point anything. Like those, like I think I shut down a Searing Light, but like you don't want to shut down a Searing Light. Okay. So I could maybe shut down a Tsunami, which could be good. But I didn't really have a great forethoughts to deal with his specific type of deck.
Right, you wanted more pressure points for that.
Well, even pressure point wouldn't have been great. I did bring in my pressure points, but even that wouldn't have been great, just because he can just either be range, just kind of like hit me from range with his bolt shots, or Chronowalker away from the pressure point.
Right.
So
what was coming out, I guess? What was coming out for these cards coming in?
Probably some, like a Kabus, I guess.
Okay. Did you find that's what you mostly shaved, like for the 3-chi swaps in? Was it Kabuses?
Yeah, usually Kabus or Warp or something like that. I think I took out some Warps because I wasn't expecting to be able to hit it consistently.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. The Warps wouldn't be like when they're just trying to bolt shot you every time, or Chronowalker away. Yeah, Warp becomes a little less strong there. Okay. You mentioned that you didn't bring Aura Purge, even though and that was because you didn't see dedicated studies. So that's round 4, and then we go into round 5. So
yes, round 5.
We got a perfect record so far.
Yes, 4-0, 8-0, perfect record. As a competitive person, I want to play and win every game. Obviously, with respect to all my opponents. I don't want to either cheat or be mean or whatever. But so I did play this one. However, if you're going in, I guess the optimal tournament play would be to probably take an intentional draw or even loss on this one, right? Because I had already guaranteed a spot top 8. This was against an Dearest Blitz, and this person top 4'd. They also learned Genesis the day before. So, if we're taking notes, I played against someone that was in the top 8, the tournament winner, and the top 4 in my Swiss rounds, and won all those games, all those matches. And so this game went 3 games, and it was my first loss of the tournament. In game 1, I had no epiphanies in the for most of the game, and it was very close. Adiros was at 25, I was at 3. I managed to draw an epiphany that round. They hit me to 3. I moved, played epiphany, drew 3 cards, managed to swarm them, because I did have a big swarm of summons out, and managed to actually win that game from 25-1 to actually being able to win. It was a very, very close, very intense game, and I used a lot of brain power to try to win that one. Game 2, going second, no Epiphanies again, and ended up losing to the last fireball they had, 0 aura left, and died to the last fireball. Then game 3, I drew 2 Epiphanies and a dedicated studies and just kind of won the game, but it ended on round 2 of rounds, after time had been called. So
Okay.
this was a 3-game set, 1-2-1, but the game had lasted a long time. I used a lot of brain power, and I was like almost burnt out by this after this, because we started the next round to top 8 almost immediately, and my brain was fried and I could barely think. If you're trying to play for the long haul, the long tournaments, like we were 14 hours at CompetEsport that day or something like that, you got to think
Right.
about spacing yourself out, right? A marathon and a sprint, as they say, and so that's something to think about. But that being said, it was a great game. So I wish that game had been streamed. That would have been fun to watch.
Cool. But
Yeah.
so I guess the small misplay in that, you could have just conceded that match and then had a drink, get some rest, and then like a 4-1 record would have got you into top 8. You're kind of locked in. Okay.
Exactly. You live, you learn, and it's fine. Like I'm there to play, right? Like,
Absolutely.
I'm a competitive person, but I'm not like super hyper, ultra competitive, I guess.
But no, it's good to identify, I guess, the small edges, right?
Mm-hmm.
Next time for
Yeah.
nationals, right? Spoiler, I guess you get to go to
Going to
nationals this year.
Canada.
So
Yeah. Woo.
Chronowalkers represent. So that brings us to top 8, where, as you said before, you're up against Palmer on that Nubia bolt shot Chronowalker, like all in kind of deck. So
That's
how'd
right.
that go?
So this is the 1 seed versus the 8 seed. I'm 5-0, 10-1 in games, and this versus the 8 seed. And so game 1, I lost the die roll. I'm going second. So keep in mind, going second. I draw no Epiphanies, and my opponent quad Chronowalkers into quad bolt shots and kills me.
Wow, just straight up.
Just straight up. Because I didn't draw my Epiphanies, I had kind of a weakish hand, and I was kind of like playing very safe, very back. Instead of playing aggressively, I was playing very safe. And you can't play safe against Anubia because she's just gonna draw so many cards.
Yes.
And so like we kind of like played like a game of cat and mouse, and then eventually it was just like the cat had too many Chronowalkers, and I couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
So that was that happened. That's okay. Game 2, this was going first. Also an incredibly close game. So then game 2, so it was very close, back and forth. He actually I think triple bolt shots me at one point, and I'm down to 4. So I'm like, oh no, he's gonna quad bolt shot me again, and I'm gonna lose. But he doesn't have that last one. So I ended up top decking Epiphany. This is key here. Top deck Epiphany.
All right.
Drew a Tsunami and a Dedicated Studies and something else. Dedicated Studies into a second Epiphany. Managed to clear both his Chronowalkers that he had and deal 6 damage to him. And then because I'm going first, I managed to run up to him, hit him down to 3, and then I have an Emergent Worm to kind of finish him off.
Right.
Unfortunately, he had a Chronowalker, but then I had a Warp Strike, so it was okay. Game 2, very close. If he had a Bolt Shot, he wins that, so just keep that in mind. Game 3, struggle early game. I didn't have any Epiphanies or Dedicated Studies early game, but I didn't want to get in the same situation that I was in game 1, so I played a little bit more aggressively. Both had mind reading out, so this is a hands open game. But I was still struggling because, again, he's drawing more cards than I am, so I'm a little bit behind. I see his hand. His hand is great. He's got 3 bolt shots and 3 Chronowalkers. And I'm like, uh-oh. And then I top deck a Dedicated Studies, play Dedicated Studies, draw Epiphany, play Epiphany, draw another Epiphany, play Epiphany, draw another Epiphany. I think I've ended up playing 3 Epiphanies there, which is I think a mistake, running out of resources later, like as the game went, but like that Dedicated Studies that drew me into Epiphany like kept the game going, and we ended up playing like a really long game. Like I think that whole match, that 3-game match, was like almost 2 hours from start to finish because there was no timed rounds. But it was okay. We didn't finish the last because they had a 4-game match at that same round. So but eventually I ran out of resources, and he managed to surround me, 4 health, If I had dealt one more damage that game, I would have won. But he had 4 health. I had 2 emergent worms. He had a Chronowalker,
None.
and basically just ended up running away, and I couldn't hit him anymore. And that was it. Congrats to Palmer. He ended up going on and winning the whole tournament. I
If you
obviously I wish I would have won, but it is what it is.
if you gotta lose the first round of the top cut, losing to the tournament winner is probably the best way that can go. So.
Yep. I told him, I was like, you have to win now, just for my sake.
Cool. I guess before we put up, the final deck stat, I guess just taking a step back and looking at the decks, were there cards that like underperformed or overperformed?
Yeah, I would say every single card performed very well, except for Warp, I guess. I didn't really play it. Granted, I only had 2. But, like, literally every card in the deck is, like, so synergistic, like, so perfectly fit. I guess if I was going to make some changes to the deck, this is the only changes I would make. I'd cut 1 Emergent Worm and 2 Warps and add 3 dedicated studies.
Right, so you want more consistency.
Yes. One thing I learned is that the deck is incredibly reliant on Epiphany. I went 8-0 in games in which I played Epiphany on turn 1, and I went 3-3 in games in which I did not play Epiphany on turn 1, and then all 3 of my losses I went second. So the deck is reliant on Epiphany and much stronger going first. So that is something to keep in mind.
And that does make sense because like half of the strength of Emergent Worm is the fact that it's only 11 for like that 3 damage and then 3/3 repeatable damage body. It's only 11 aura. So like you can take advantage of having more cards to play because they are so cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, and that is why there's so many Emergent Worms and not so many Chronowalkers, because you're going to be seeing so many cards and you want to be able to play them. Right. So
cool.
That's basically it. Yeah, I mean the deck when it was performing well, performed incredibly well, and when it wasn't performing well was like actually pretty average as a deck, I would say. So it can like really get some high highs and some middling middles, which probably makes the deck pretty strong. And I definitely liked it a lot, and I think it's probably a pretty good deck going forward. I would say you have to really think a little bit differently with this deck because you're A, playing it Swift speed a lot, and B, the awareness of Emergent Worm plus Bazin is a little weird, and you gotta like think about proper moving and turning because of how Warp Strike works and how Emergent Worm works. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
So yeah, going into deck stats. So with 5 dedicated studies and 4 epiphanies, we are 71% to have one of those 2 cards in our opening hand. And of course, like a dedicated studies will help you start digging towards an epiphany. And I guess with the change that Eric said of like going up to, 8 dedicated studies and 4 epiphanies, that would pop us up to an 82.6% chance of having one of those 2 cards in our starting hand. So that gets a lot better.
Yeah, and that sounds pretty good. So I guess actually I would also like to talk about Epiphany. Epiphany's been a hot topic, in recent weeks, months.
For good reason.
Want a band, and I even talked to Assad about getting it banned, that day. And after I lost, he was like, "What do you think about it now?" I was like, "You know what? I guess I lost, so I guess it's fine, right?" But thinking more about it, I would say, a couple final thoughts. I think it's might be one of the strongest HEs in the game. Obviously, it's restricted, which is why. But it's too swingy of a card. So like,
right.
I don't, I assume they're not going to get ban Epiphany, but I would also recommend not to play Epiphany-based decks like this in a casual setting, because if you go Epiphany dedicated studies, your opponent can't win. Like they can't. There's nothing they can do, right? Like they're not gonna like outplay you. They're not gonna like do some like fancy thing. They're gonna like put their cards down. They're gonna leave. They're not gonna play Genesis again. And I don't necessarily blame them, because like if someone does that to me, I wouldn't want to play either, because I'm like, all right, yeah, you win, great, you got it. And I think that's kind of the issue here, is that it can lead to these like crazy non-games, especially with these decks that are pretty reliant on it. So when I didn't draw it, it could be a very close game, back and forth, where the deck was like kind of whatever. It was good, it was alright, but it wasn't wowing. And then when it popped off, it would just like pop off so far above any other deck that like it was unstoppable. And that's kind of my issue with Epiphany, is that like it does lead to these kind of like these like salty wins, you know, or these games where people don't want to play and stuff like that. So I would think it probably doesn't need to necessarily be banned in a competitive setting, but like I would recommend not to play it in a casual setting if you want people to continue playing the game.
Yeah, because honestly, this deck, as we mentioned, like we're trying to use Epiphany to basically be able to play more Emergent Worms because of their cheap costs. So this is almost a fair case use of Epiphany, and it still felt that just playing one Epiphany put just such an insurmountable wall in front of your opponent where they have to make up so much with their cards. Like they have to get like 2-2-for-1s to try and stay at parity with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Think about it, because you're also playing like Emergent or Worm Strike, which are kind of like burn spells plus. Like they do damage and they do something else on top of damage. And so you're a burn deck that can play card draw, right? Like imagine. Like that's crazy, right?
So it's the treasure cruise in for our anyone who played Magic.
Mm-hmm.
Treasure cruise in burn.
Yeah. Exactly. So my, I guess, opinion would be I would prefer it banned. If they don't want it to ban, that is fine. I would say it should be banned in any casual setting. If you want to teach people how to play the game, if you want to, have fun, play around with the cool tactics that the game can offer, don't play Epiphany. If you want to like spike a tournament, I guess you could just play Nubia. So it's like, whatever. But but a properly built Epiphany deck, like if I had those maybe 3 extra dedicated studies or something like that, or could like more consistently hit it, then I can just create games that are unwinnable for my opponent and just run away with it. So, just some thoughts. Yeah. Anyway, after that rant, I guess I would like to say, I had a blast down there at CompetEsport. It was fun meeting a lot of people down there. There was George and then and Tyler. They were very friendly, very helpful running the event. They're great people. Huge shout out to them. Also, shout out to Palmer and Wally for coming in first and second. And then, of course, Wally for building half the decks at the tournament. Congratulations to him. And then, of course, thanks to Joe G and Connor for driving me around at times. And Justin and the final round crew. They were pretty cool. Helped me out and drove me around, and were great people. And then Assad for creating the game and being a judge. He was great.
Yeah.
And then
awesome game, and it sounds like an awesome community down at CompetEsport.
And then of course Scheming Skeleton. I had so many names. Scheming Skeleton as well, Jordan, and Mrs. Scheming Skeleton. Very very nice to meet both of you, and for doing the stream and then talking. It was great. So yeah, overall had a blast there. Hopefully I'll go back. That would be fun. And if anyone from there is going to Canada for the championship, I'll see you there.
Yeah, well, I guess 7 other people who were at that event will be going to that.
And then I'll meet Shenanigans for the first time, too.
Yes, the Chronowalkers will be in the same time. Yeah. I know.
Get your paper deck together. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I have to have a paper deck together. All right. Well, thanks for an awesome tournament report. The Chronowalkers' foray into competitive circuit play. Something, I don't know, intense words. All right. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed that and like it in the future.
Yep. And we'll see you in the next one. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.